This is a review of the assessment process at Calvary University at a workshop conducted on December 8th in 2020. This slide depicts the elements of the assessment program at Calvary University. It shows the institutional level assessments right here and data collection opportunities that we have that we would use to collect information to support the assessment process. There's three elements in the institutional level assessment. First is the academic assessment process, which is the academic departments. And at the beginning of the academic year, the departments produce a plan. At the end of the academic year, departments produce a report based on the plan that they put together at the beginning of the year. So there's actually two aspects to that. The non-academic assessment process involves departments that are not academic, such as maintenance and student support service type things. Food service, those areas of the institution that do not actually instruct but support the infrastructure of the institution. And they submit a report at the end of the academic year, and the format is different, and we'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. And then finally, the institutional assessment report right here is a roll-up report that's put together by the Institutional Effectiveness Committee at the end of the academic year based on the report submitted by each of the departments. Data collection opportunities include, at the institutional level, the student satisfaction inventory, which is done every other year, graduating senior surveys, alumni surveys at the first and fifth years. These surveys provide information that everyone that's submitting a report can use. There's data in it for everybody. At the program level, of course, we have student rating of instruction, formative assessments. These are assessments that occur along a timeline where students can get feedback and make corrections in their trajectory. And that's either at the course level or at the program level. A program example of this would be the theater department's portfolio review process, where students present a portfolio at the end of the academic year to the faculty, which is reviewed by the faculty in a board type setting where the student's sitting in front of them and they walk through what the student has presented, and there is rubrics used to score the portfolios, and the students get feedback, immediate feedback, and the department gets feedback as well as to how well they're doing in preparing students along the path that they need to go. There's also summative assessments on the academic side. Those include things like internships, student teaching, thesis, dissertations. These are the culminating events. Acting recitals, music recitals, the culminating events that kind of wrap everything together, that the student can demonstrate that they have the knowledge they need to move forward, that they've met the program objectives before they leave the department. Then also the triennial review process. We just finished one last year, every 3 years, looking at all the academic programs in the institution to make recommendations for improvement or modifications in the programs. This slide depicts the assessment cycle that was instituted actually by Keith Miller back around 2000 when Calvary was going through the first iteration of HLC accreditation for initial accreditation. And it depicts the elements of the assessment process that we use at Calvary. We're going to start here at the university level. And the academic programs, student development, for example, these are non-academic program assessments. Administrative services, these represent the kinds of assessments that are done, either academic or non-academic, and the fact that the academic programs are doing the assessment plan and then the report, and everyone's doing assessment reports at the end of the year. They use survey data and other information in order to provide evidence for the reports. The reports are prepared, they're submitted to the Institutional Effectiveness Committee and the Institutional Effectiveness Director, who assess the reports, review them, provide comments or feedback, ask for updates or changes as necessary, and then they produce an annual report based on these individual reports. And that annual report goes to me, myself, the Chief Academic Officer, the President, the Cabinet, and in some cases the Board based on what is reported. There may be things that take Board action to address. From that report and all these things, we have the budgeting, which is not on here, but budgeting and the strategic plan have input from the report. The data goes to support programmatic process and process improvements, and then the cycle starts all over again. Okay, assessment of student learning. This is COTS cited in Weimer in 2013. We ought to be up to the task of figuring out what it is that our students know by the end of 4 years at the college that they did not know at the beginning. Yes, that would be really important. The Higher Learning Commission definition of assessment of student learning is um, provides data information that you need on your students' learning, and this is directly from their publication, so the language is theirs, the Higher Learning Commission's. Engages you and others in analyzing and using this data information to confirm and improve teaching and learning, produces evidence that students are learning the outcomes that you intend for them to learn, guides you in making educational and institutional improvements, evaluates whether changes made improve or impact student learning, and documents the learning and your efforts. This is the ABHE Commission on Accreditation definition of institutional effectiveness. So not looking at the academic perspective, but looking at the entire institution, taken from Standard 2. Ongoing assessment of operations and services to evaluate the extent to which these functions are effective in supporting mission fulfillment and improving institutional effectiveness. So we're looking at operations and services. Ongoing assessment of operations and services. Second, meaningful analysis of the assessment data. So we're just not collecting data, we're actually doing analysis of the data to use for improvement, to clearly document ongoing. It's clearly documented. We have ongoing planning processes for the purposes of improving in teaching, learning, and overall institutional effectiveness. Third, a written comprehensive institutional improvement plan. So we have a plan that results from the assessment process at the institutional level. And lastly, the ongoing provision of reliable information to the public. And there's certain things that we have to provide to the public by federal regulation. That include graduation rates, employment rates for graduates of professional programs. And this data has to be presented in a format that's easily accessible on our website, which we actually have on our website. So all of these things fit into not only helping us to improve, but also meet regulatory requirements by the federal government. So why should I be concerned if you're a department chair about this? Assessments designed to help improve your programs and your operations. So it's just not doing a report because you have to. It's to enable us, all of us, to improve the institution. It focuses faculty and staff attention on the use of evidence to guide planning because the focus has to be on identifying, collecting evidence in order to support the changes that we make. When you do research, you just don't write stuff up based on emotions or feelings. We all know this. We write stuff up based on the evidence. Measure what you value and value what you measure. So this requires a plan. This is why, for example, we have assessment plans in the academic departments so that we can identify up front what we want to measure to the degree that we can using rubrics. And then at the end, we can look at how we did to see how we performed. And then students, faculty, and staff are encouraged when recommendations are taken seriously so that people see that recommendations actually turn into reality. We're going to look at the assessment process. We're going to look first at the academic department process, and then we'll look at the non-academic department processes. So Dr. Briggs submitted a report from 2019 to 2020. The document includes both the assessment plan that she started out with and the report that resulted from that plan at the end of the academic year. The elements of the part one, which is the plan portion that she submitted at the beginning of the academic year, starts with this, the plan itself. And these are the things that she wants to do during the course of the 2019-2020 academic year. And she identifies Calvary's mission, and this is the format we use for the academic department plan. The mission and the Department of Education mission, so the specific mission of the department itself, and the program learning outcomes. And these are outcomes that are identified by the department, by the program, and they're published in the catalog. So anyone looking at our education program can see that these are what our learning outcomes are for the education program. Next, she identifies the student learning outcomes. And this is related to what the state of Missouri, the DESE, requires for educator preparation programs. the kinds of things that they expect for our graduates to be able to do upon graduation. So these SLOs become important in the measurement process at the end of the academic year for the report itself. And these are the measurements that are going to be used to check the student learning outcome, the progress in student learning outcomes. And these are measurable, definable criteria that the education department can use. Let's just looking at the first one there. Each student who completes ED 190 and or ED 247 will achieve a score of 83% or higher on the biblical philosophy of education paper. That's something that we believe is important. You can see at the top there, each student who completes those two classes and or will compose a comprehensive biblical philosophy of education paper. And this is kind of foundational. This is something that's very important for us. And so that's the measurement for that. And this is continuation. Then at the end of the year, she submitted the assessment report, and she identifies the findings at the end of the year based on each of the measurements that she identified at the beginning of the year, and did a report on those. And you can see that here. She talked about in M1, she talked about ED 190 and ED 247, and the results that the students achieved, and things that she identified. 2 freshmen had very poor writing skills. So there is that. So you're finding out not only programmatic areas, but ways to improve individual student opportunities as well. And you see that she has the findings and she has the actions that are taken associated with those. And this kind of works its way through the entire process. At the end is a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, produced by the department with respect to the undergraduate education program. And these also feed into things such as planning for budgeting and for long-term strategic planning, things that address the weaknesses and threats or to reinforce the strengths and opportunities. So improvements from assessment. At the end of the assessment report, something that has not occurred recently, that has fallen off, and I'm not sure why, we have required departments to identify changes made from assessment. So, and these changes need to have evidence, something that points to these changes or undergirds those changes, so that we can point to those things, especially when accreditors come, that these are changes made from from assessment, that improve the institution, that improve academic programs, that improve students' lives, that improve students' learning opportunities. So, like I said, we've kind of fallen away from this. We need to recapture this process in all of our assessment reports. So, for example, identify program and course level improvements you'll make based on the assessment, and identify the evidence that goes along with that, and instructional improvements that you will make based on assessment. What will the improvements look like, and how will you achieve them? Okay, we're going to move on to non-academic departments and committees. This slide addresses the assessment reports for non-academic departments, and this is the format for non-academic assessment reports. And it revolves around the 6 questions you see there in number 3, 1 through 6. And included among those are program strengths from surveys or other feedback. So what strengths does your department have based on feedback from surveys? And the really critical ones to look at here are the SSI, the graduating senior surveys, and maybe the alumni survey, and then any surveys that you do internally to your department that you got approval for to provide feedback to you. The SSI and graduating senior surveys are really critical for non-academic departments because you don't have direct student interaction usually to get the type of feedback that academic programs do. So those are the go-to areas that you want to use for looking at these items, for program strengths and also for weaknesses. So we can identify things that need to be improved, and we've had departments who have done that seriously and have seen significant changes in student evaluations of the department over the years because of initiatives that have been undertaken to improve student services. Number 3, how do evaluations demonstrate achieve or not achieving of departmental goals and objectives? The way this one is supposed to work is that the non-academic department will take each of the objectives of that department and walk through objective by objective how evaluations either supported achievement or showed how the department failed to achieve those objectives for that academic year, and write about them and provide citations to support the conclusions that you have made with each of the objectives. So this number 3 may take a couple of pages to do that, but this is kind of the in-depth version, the in-depth portion of what you're doing in your assessment report. It kind of revolves around number 3. Number 4, identifying new emerging issues that have kind of erupted during the year that you didn't anticipate, or maybe you did anticipate, but it's just something now that we have to deal with in your area. Number 5, this gets to what I mentioned earlier on academic departments in terms of identifying changes from assessment. This is where you would list the changes you have made based on assessment from this year or the previous year, and cite the evidence that is related to those changes. And then number 6, recommendations for changes to the evaluation process itself, or the assessment process itself. This is an example of an answer to part of question 3 from our academic office report from last year. And one of our objectives is to deliver effective, relevant, and consistent academic product of a uniformly high standard in accordance with criteria established by accrediting agencies and related organizations. And so the answer to that question, and I just picked this one at random, based on the focus visits, our comprehensive reports for supporting the actual comprehensive visits in 2019 and 2020, and then also the faculty development workshops that we did last year that Rose conducted. So those are evidence that support our attempt to achieve this particular objective. This is an example of an answer to question 5, which is what kinds of changes have occurred from our report from last year. And you can see we created a first-year student experience task force where we reorganized the Bachelor of Music to eliminate instrumental options. And this is because through the Triennial Review Committee minutes, submitted an MBA request to HLC, and that was done through the business department. HLC recommended greater faculty participation in academic governance, so we moved the academic review process, shared the academic review process from the ACC to the Faculty Senate as a result of that. So these are kind of examples of an answer to question number 5 in a specific academic, non-academic department report. Assessment reports for committees is identical to the non-academic departments, and these are the committees that currently in the assessment plan are required to submit assessment reports at the end of the academic year. And just let you take a second here to see those. Okay, so what happens to the reports when they're done? Well, as indicated in that circular chart you saw earlier, the Institutional Effectiveness Committee reviews the reports when they're turned in. There is a start point for the institutional level report that's produced by the committee, and reports become records of evidence in themselves. So we can look back at a report and cite that for future actions. This is examples of program and changes from assessment, and this is from an older list back in 2017. The kinds of things that we used to do in the academic assessment, the institutional level report that was drawn from the various individual assessment reports at the end of the year. And among them you see here, get this to work, Calvary adopted Canvas as a new learning management system. That started in that year, and that was as a result of a faculty recommendation that we need to move to an LMS. And specifically, Tressa Shoemaker came to me one day and said, you know, we're using this online management system, and it's costing us a lot of money. And it was. I didn't realize how much until she told me and I saw the figures. We were paying a lot of money for a separate online program delivery system. And at the time, those of you who have been around for a while recall this, I was in situations where I was teaching a class in the day, the same class at night, and then the same class online in 3 different formats using 3 different syllabi. And it was really difficult to manage. And so the faculty, were doing triple the work. And the students were getting not uniform product because they were different, because they were formatted differently. And so what Tressa and I discussed was the possibility of moving to a learning management system where we could do away with the triple work and focus on an LMS that could do everything. So there was a committee that was formed that included faculty and staff, specifically Aaron Heath, for obvious reasons, was included in that, and they reviewed various LMSs and came up with a recommendation to adopt Canvas. So this was an initiative that started with Tressa and then moved to the faculty, and the faculty, that committee actually reviewed the various options and made the recommendation that we adopt Canvas, which we did, which is a fraction of the cost and reduced the workload tremendously for all of us, so that we're now only working on a single platform and delivering a class once as opposed to 3 times per, in this case, cycle as opposed to semesters. So it made our lives, at least from my perspective, much easier. So that is an example of program changes from assessment that was initiated at the faculty level. So this concludes a brief overview of the assessment processes at Calvary University. And hopefully this is helpful to you. If you have any questions, please contact me about the process or Dr. Piercy, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And thanks a lot for your support and for everyone being engaged in this process. Have a great day, and also have a great Christmas.